So Tom, we're at the beginning of your layout tour here. I was going to ask you, what's the name of your railroad?
I call it the North Pontiac.
Okay, the North Pontiac.
Correct. The Pontiac is an area north and west of Ottawa on the Quebec side.
Okay, and we're in the back room here, which is where you've located your staging. And it's quite long and cleverly done because it kind of runs the length here of this particular room, which I guess is part of the pottery domain.
The workshop is shared territory. The pottery is more the other side.
Oh, okay. Well, nevertheless,
I do have a kiln in here.
a kiln is in here, I see. Okay.
That's my wife's spray booth.
All right, so I see there's two different levels here of staging. I guess that represents both ends of the railroad in the point-to-point construct.
That's correct. The lower end here, the front 5 tracks are what I call the CNR interchange. It's my major interchange point with the rest of the North American Rail network. The back track here is the CP interchange.
Right.
It's not a CP line, but it's a CN line that interchanges with CPR. And so there's traffic originating from both staging areas during a session.
Okay, so in this context and coming into the layout, you can have an opportunity for two different railroads to meet.
Absolutely, and certainly, I mean, in Canada, realistically, we have 2 dominant railways, but they both play a role in this layout. The first bunch of track work you showed, the 3 tracks up there, represent the north end of the railway, the terminating point.
Okay. So when after a train has gone through, it's like a bridge then, a bridging line, it finishes up at the top? Or
Correct.
And is there a capability here for trains to reverse themselves and come back?
Only with the five-fingered motion.
Okay, so the idea in an operating session then is that they're strictly going to end up and terminated.
They'll end up
level.
here, or an operator will have to restage them by hand. If you look at the lower level, there's a sector plate at the far end here. I can pull in a train, run the locomotive around, and switch it properly. The upper level is not so equipped.
Okay. So I guess this is a major spot for you to configure what's going to happen in the evening.
Correct. This is where I stage the 2 major trains coming on the layout. It's also where we stage the passenger train.
Yeah.
At the upper level, though, there's 2 trains staged up there. One is an ore train that will proceed the length of the layout. The second is a train that we call the Carroll Creek Local. He starts at the north end of the railway. He does the switching at the 2 industries up in the north end of the railway. There's a mine and there's a lumber facility.
Yes.
And then he goes into Carroll Creek, which is a major lumber plant. There's a bit of switching there because I need a lot of boxcars coming out of there, and I need to get that switch twice a session rather than once. So he'll switch it the first time, then he picks up any northbound traffic that was left for him from the day before and bring that back to the north end.
Another interesting part of your staging area, which doesn't happen on some railroads, is that when you talk about staging, that usually the trains are set for the operation session, but here at the lower level here you have an operator actually putting their train together.
Correct. To make the job a little more challenging, I require that the trains leaving here be blocked, but I intentionally unblock them between sessions because they tend to arrive in blocks.
Yes.
Just to provide an additional challenge to the operator.
Okay. And when you use the term blocking, some people might not know what you're getting at there.
Blocking means that I want all the cars going to a particular destination put together, and I want those blocks in a particular sequence on the train.
Okay.
That facilitates the trains as they're passing through intermediate points to simply pull off the block of cars destined for that point. And when we get up to Shawtown, which is the division point, it makes it easier for the operator there to block those, to organize those blocks that are proceeding further north into the separate blocks that will have to be put on the northbound train.
So how many towns do you have along the way here?
There's 4 major towns and 1 major paper plant that are major switching foci, and one of those towns, so those are the major activity points. There's also a branch line up at the north end that serves the mine and serves a lumbering facility.
So within a tight space on a single track main line with passing sidings, blocking's got to be pretty important then.
Blocking really facilitates the switching. This is, in many ways, a switching layout. Extended over some significant modeling distance.
So now, let's start here at this, I guess what you would call the junction with the rest of the world, and move forward into your operational layout through the wall here. I guess there's a track I see that extends through that also works as a lead for the preparation of trains, and I guess there's a switch on the other side that allows the train to enter the layout.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've left staging, we've come through the wall, and we've entered your layout at the lower level. Can you describe basically where we are and what's happening here?
Where we are, actually we've got a major industry here and the first town. But what we have in back as well is an extension of a drill track, so that when the operator is blocking his train in the yard, he doesn't come through into this yard. So there's a long drill track through there, goes in another 5 feet of hidden trackage to keep the trains separate.
So you're talking about the trains that are being prepared and staged,
Correct.
And they have their own drill track.
They have a drill track here.
And it comes through the wall.
Comes through the wall, but it just goes right down the back there and
Perfect.
stays hidden under the scenery.
So you're not interfering with what's going on in the first town,
Correct.
basically.
So the first town that you come into is Lake Ward. It
Yes.
has a number of manufacturing industries. It has a power plant. It has a passenger station. It also has a second major function, that this is the switching point for all traffic going into the Cameron Mills paper facility, which is on the other side of the aisle that I'm sitting in.
So it has its own switcher, this town, then,
This
to
town
do that.
requires its own switcher because it's twice a day going to deliver a bunch of loads into this mill complex.
It's quite an extensive complex. How many sidings do you have here, roughly?
There's 7 different sidings that you can deliver to, and there's one at the end to help facilitate running around.
Extraordinary buildings. They look like they've all been modified from different kits.
They've all been modified, and they're all, I've tried to make them of a substantial size
Yes.
because paper facilities are large. They were large. And if you're going to consume large numbers of cars, then you need the structures, I think, that reinforce that image.
Now it's interesting, the buildings, I noticed that in a number of places here the rolling stock goes right into the building.
Yeah, and that was pretty real in the industry.
Yes.
If you're shipping paper products, we have a quite inclement weather in Canada much of the year, and this protects the products.
Now, not being able to see inside the buildings for the operator, do you do anything to assist them in terms of knowing what's in the building?
What we do is keep, very informally, a list. So it shows there are 3 hidden tracks, and who's ever switching here is required to keep this up to date.
Right.
So that when somebody wants to know, where do I pull this car from, they can look at this list, and that tells them where to pull the car out of.
That's nice. So that really sets it up for when you're coming into town, you're looking for a car.
Yeah.
You know where to find it and how deep it is in the in a building or something along that line.
Correct. Now, this wasn't here originally, and then people kept pulling cars out and having a look what was on the string, and this just makes it far easier. It's not uncommon when you come into this yard to find that the destinations are already full, and that's where you often find boxcars sitting out here in the storage tracks,
Right.
waiting for cars to be pulled so that they can get delivered to those spots.
So it's the sequence of events, and a train would be coming out of the town with the locomotive on the front, caboose on the back, and some cars in the middle.
Correct.
And then they would come into this track here on a, I guess you would call it sort of a main, and then they would be required to sort themselves out in terms of getting the caboose out of the way and making sure you're trailing and facing switches for whatever particular car you're operating.
That's what I'll do if I'm short of operators.
Yeah.
If I've got a full complement, there's a dedicated operator in the mill.
Okay.
So he has his locomotive, he never leaves the mill, so he'll be doing all the pulls, organizing the outbound string,
Right.
waiting for the train to the transfer run to come in from Lake Ward, who will drop off a new string, pick up the old one, take it back into Lake Ward, sort it out there, and let the operator here do all the deliveries.
So that's kind of a nice feature then. It allows that Lake Ward operator time to sort out his own town with not having to get caught up too much over here at
Correct.
the mill.
However, the CN freight has come in, sorry, the CP freight comes in first, it drops its cars for the mill, those get delivered, those get switched, I come over here, switch the waybills around, tell the operator here to do a second cycle, and when the CN interchange train comes in, it'll drop off a further string of cars and we repeat the sequence.
Oh,
So the mill gets delivered to and switched twice in a session.
that's fantastic. So now, I see that you, I noticed something on your upper level here is a little diagram. Maybe you can describe a little bit about...
That's the logical description of the layout.
Right.
So it's showing the CN and the CP interchange that we looked at.
Yes.
It's showing Lake Ward, which is here.
Right.
It shows Cameron's Mills, which can only be reached from Lake Ward. You can't cheat and pull in from CP.
Right.
And then it shows the subsequent switching points or destinations farther up the line.
So it's going to go from Lake Ward to Shawtown to Mount Malcolm, Carroll Creek, and then there's a Nordville and Northeast branch
Yeah.
at
And in
the end
fact,
of the line. Yeah.
Right here is where the Northeast branch cuts off.
I see at the top, yeah. Okay, so this is kind of nice too because I guess it helps the Lake Ward operator to deal with all those CNCP trains and to make sure everything's blocked properly when cars are being put on trains to head to the north.
Yeah, and for new operators, I know if you've ever been on a new layout trying to operate, it's often very important to know which guys are going to the left and which are going to the right.
Yes.
Very simplistically.
Yeah, yeah, and it's nice here to have a bit of a track diagram too, so you can see what's going on in terms of the factories and their names, and I guess that corresponds directly to what you'd find on the car card.
That's absolutely. The waybills will tell you which track to put a car into. It'll also tell you which track to pull a car out of.
Perfect.
So it helps operators that don't know the towns very well to know where to reach, where to go looking for a particular car.
And this is fairly simply done. It looks like you just took a piece of paper and printed it and put what you wanted on it and drew the lines.
It's just MS Word.
Yeah.
Really simply done.
And if you're not computer literate, I guess you could even do it by hand.
Yes, you could.
We've left Lake Ward, and there's a wall which actually serves in many ways as a good scenic block from seeing Lake Ward to come around a loop and back into the layout again. This particular transition area, what do we have here?
What we have here is a series of older, smaller structures representing industries that are no longer served by the railway. I will eventually be putting in the remains of the old rail line here. The other thing we've got here is the line is starting to descend and heading into the tunnel at the far end down here. And what the railway do is it will loop around, in fact, the entire length of the peninsula.
So it's going to go back through the wall and under...
It goes back through the wall and under Lake Ward.
Oh. So what you've actually created is some distance between the towns by doing this.
It gives me two advantages. First of all, it gives me about 25 feet of running distance between the two towns. The other thing it does, it lets me make a very abrupt 90-degree turn here. You want me to pull the... Are you interested in seeing the tracks?
Always interested in seeing what it looks like if you can just pop this up.
I'm not sure this is the best view.
Well, it'll serve nicely. I'll just get right in there.
Yeah, so you can see you've got track there.
And that track along the back wall there that comes to a halt is part of that that yard lead, I take it.
Yes, that's the drill track.
The drill track is right in the back. And so basically what's happening here is the train comes in to the tunnel, it loops around through the wall, and then comes back underneath itself, which is a little hard to see here, but you can see it right along the wall there, right underneath the drill track, and comes out on itself. So it really loops twice, I guess. Does it? It comes in on the top
and
and
goes
goes
on the top. It does an S bend
S-bend.
around the end of the peninsula.
And then comes back out through here. Interesting. Now you had the chance to come down grade through that very interesting loop effect and into what town? Where are we now?
This is Shawtown. This is the central point of the railway. This is our so-called division point.
Okay. And in here, I guess as a division point, you have what components? What would you find in a division point?
We have the locomotive servicing facility.
Yes.
We have the sorting yard that you're just spanning to now.
It's like a classification yard.
A classification yard because the northbound CP and CN trains both end here.
Oh, okay.
And they drop off any cars that are going farther north. And a separate train will have left in the morning going up the helix and servicing the northern part of the railway.
And then it also has a passenger station, I guess, as well, eh?
We run passenger traffic. We're claiming that it was still profitable in the day, and certainly it adds some operating interest to our sessions. One aspect of passenger operations is because we're heading up into more basic track work, both a dining car and a milk car have to be switched off the passenger train when it comes through here, and switched back on when the train comes back from the north heading south.
It's nice to be able to do a bit of passenger train operations. That doesn't happen too often. Usually they're getting away type trains. Now you also have some industries here as well, some larger industries.
Correct. We have some local switching here. There's a electronics facility here, a silver works. At the far end there's a large brewery.
Well, that's always handy.
It's handy.
Are there samples there?
No, sir. What is pervasive across the railway is there's a local fuel facility. That rail was the way that coal and oil was being delivered up to these towns, and therefore every town we have just about has a fuel handling facility.
And there's the town switcher.
There's the town switcher.
And in front here, I guess what you have are locations for your cars organized by where they're going.
Correct. Those are the northbound.
That's the northbound group. So Nordville, Carroll Creek, and Mount Malcolm are north. And then over here we have interchanges for CP and CN. So they're swapping cars for different railroads right here.
As they're building the southbound train, they're building them onto the CN and CP, and that will be both cars switched locally out of Shawtown Industries and cars that have been delivered by the southbound Carroll Creek turn that has come back from the north the previous day.
Yeah, and there's Cameron Mills. And then over here I see you have a drop-off layover and process. You were talking about that earlier.
Correct.
So by the look of this, you've already got everything processed. It's out on the road because there's nothing in the process box.
Correct. Although this layout is largely, as we finished the last session, it has not been restaged.
I notice you've got some interesting little cardboard pieces with stuff on them here.
Oh, I just put them on the roofs of the various strings in the yard. The classification yard is normally quite full.
Okay.
And it's not unusual to have multiple blocks on the same track. And this aids the operator here in keeping it separate in his own mind.
Well, that's a great idea too. Now looking at Shawtown, it's probably one of the largest towns on the railroad. As you can see, it extends all along this room. How many feet is this roughly that you've got in this town?
Oh, what's visible here is probably, let me count the roof panels, it's 14 feet.
Yeah, and then you're coming to a curve here, and then Shawtown continues actually around the corner.
Correct. There's a power plant tucked in the back corner, but there's a dairy in front here, and actually behind you, Chris, there's another lumber facility.
Okay, so it's actually coming around the room here. Still the same town. So the local operator here has responsibilities all the way to this lumber mill.
He does, and in fact, the line to the lumber mill is also the drill track for the classification yard. So it's a dual purpose.
Well, that's very clever. And then after leaving town here, I see another tunnel.
Correct.
It looks like it's starting to go upgrade from the main.
Again, correct. This line here is the main line, leave going north, and what you're entering there is the helix.
Oh, okay.